Welcome back to the search for the spookiest. This is my final episode on oceanic horror films. We've done mermaids, we've done gillmen. Now I'm just gonna do plain old sea monsters, because that's the real attraction, right? When you talk ocean horror films, that's the one everyone thinks of, right? Oh wait, no they don't. They think of shark movies. Shark movies, I'm going to dismiss from this category. I'm just gonna say that up front, because so many top 10 shark movie lists have been done. So many reviews of crappy shark movies have been done. I'm not going to do anything that a million people haven't already done better on the internet already. So I'm not going to talk about shark movies. And also, I mean, aside from one shark movie, they're all shit. Like, there's one good shark movie, and that's the original Jaws. Everything after that is garbage. It's funny garbage, it's entertaining garbage, but it's garbage. And many of them qualify as sea monsters. I mean, there's ridiculous crap like two-headed shark attack followed by three-headed shark attack and Sharktopus and Sharktopus versus Crocosaurus or something. Yeah, those are sea monsters, but they're still sharks. I'm gonna avoid sharks altogether. No sharks on this list. We're talking krakens and giant octopi and giant crabs and all kinds of horrors like that in the ocean. Stuff that doesn't exist or mutated versions of things that do exist. So without any further ado, let's dive into the deep and start the search for the spookiest sea monster movie. There aren't a whole lot of sea monsters today. When people want to make a sea monster movie now, it's usually a shark or a megalodon or something related to a shark. But back in the 50s and 60s, they were all the rage. It was back then that we got movie after movie about giant sea monsters wreaking havoc on civilization. Many like It Came From Beneath the Sea, the classic from 1955. This movie I would pick as one of the standout classics. There's many others like The Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, but the monster in that is just a giant lizard, and it's not really a sea creature. So I'm not going to count that, because if you count that, then hell, I mean, Godzilla is a monster from the sea. So we're going to cut it off where it has to be a sea monster. And It Came From Beneath the Sea is about a giant octopus. Now I'm going to say up front, this movie's not for everybody. I think if you're not a fan of old classic Silver Age horror science fiction like I am, which not everybody is. Some people find the genre very slow, very dull. I don't. I think it's full of charm. I think it's exciting. It's usually quick and to the point, and it just builds up to that moment with the monster you want to see. But I can see how some people find those kind of hokey and not interesting. So if that's not really your thing, this isn't really your era of film, I would say stay away from it. Unless you love stop motion effects. I don't think anyone would really deny that Ray Harryhausen was the king of stop motion. I mean, Jason and the Argonauts, Clash of the Titans, and this is a great example of his work. The octopus in this movie, while yes, obviously not real, is mind-blowingly well animated. It looks so cool. There's legitimately some great scenes in this movie that I think keep it from being a little less stereotypical of the era, where typically these movies would be the whole movie. There's a lot of science babble and light scares without seeing the monster. And then in the last 5 minutes, you'd see the monster and it would get defeated. But in this movie, we see the monster multiple times. There's an amazing scene where sailors first come in contact with the monster. And there's rear projection. You can tell the monster's not really there. But the effect is actually pretty darn good for 1955, to be honest. And even though it doesn't look real, you still can believe that there's this giant tentacle rising up behind them. When you see the size of the tentacle compared to the people in the foreground, it really does create an idea of how big this monster actually is. The characters are pretty good in the movie. I'm not going to say they're fantastic. They usually are pretty dull in these movies, but there's a good dynamic between the main three heroes. A somewhat good dynamic. There are memorable moments with them. But I think it's a little less than it could have been. The opening scene with the guys on the submarine just chatting with each other and, killing time, I think those characters maybe should have been the main characters because they were fun, but the main characters aren't bad. Again, it's not really for everyone, but it is a classic, and I definitely recommend it if you love Silver Age horror and you've never seen it, or if you love stop motion effects. But the Silver Age had way more sea monster movies, like Roger Corman's Attack of the Crab Monsters. I actually originally almost put this in the series I made last summer, which I never released, called Fathoms of Fear, which is kind of what these have turned into. Really only for one reason. This movie was one of Roger Corman's earlier films, and it's actually his most successful film to date at that time. If you don't know who Roger Corman is and you're a fan of classic horror, what are you doing? Because Roger Corman is the man. I guarantee he's responsible for at least a handful of the movies you love. And I think personally, he is the most influential and important person in the world of film still alive today. He influenced everybody. So many people owe their careers to him. From actors, from Jack Nicholson to Robert De Niro, to directors from Francis Ford Coppola to Martin Scorsese. But Roger Corman was the B-movie king. He made movies on little budgets in a quick amount of time, and he's made well over 1,000 movies in his life. By the time he was, I think, in his early 30s or late 20s, he had already made over 100 films. Attack of the Crab Monsters, he says he believed to be super successful at the time for a couple of reasons. He said that it had a quick pace where every scene was either action or suspense. He didn't waste much time with just character talking or character development, which he said obviously is important, but he thought for this kind of movie, this is what people come to see. And he also said it was because of the absurdity of the title alone. And I think that had something to do with it. And the effects, usually considered really bad, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, the human eyes on them look silly, but they're almost a little eerie the way they look. And the special effects aren't too bad when you consider how little a crab will actually move its body as it's moving. I feel like today with CG, they would over-animate every inch of that crab, and every part of it would be wiggling and writhing and squirming like CG monsters always look like. They just look, their bodies are just squirming all over the place. There's just too much action. So I think the limited movement actually works for crabs. But they talk, and they don't sound like mindless beasts. They actually sound quite sophisticated.
So, you have wounded me, and I must grow a new claw. Well and good, for I can do it in a day. But will you grow new lives when I have taken yours from you?
But there is a reason for this, because when the crabs kill their victims in this movie, they absorb their minds. They don't quite get their thoughts, but they get their brain power. So with each kill, they're getting smarter and smarter. It's definitely not a great movie, but it's a ton of fun if you like B horror films. Speaking of Roger Corman, the first real film he got to make himself was a sea monster movie, Monster from the Ocean Floor from 1954, just a few years before Attack of the Crab Monsters. This movie's about a giant amoeba with one big red eye who's coming out at night and killing people on the coast of Mexico. The female lead is super interested in this monster and is kind of going on a hunt to expose and destroy the monster and stop it from all the havoc it's wreaking. She runs into a marine biologist character who rides around in this weird little one-man submarine that's like controlled by pedaling your feet. I don't even know if this thing is real or not, but if it is, that's pretty cool actually. The only thing is he's kind of a dick because I get it's only for one person, but rather than allowing her to try it out and go in and pedal around, he has her hold on while he's protected in this submarine, and he goes out into shark-infested waters with her hanging off the back of it. It's like, dude, that's not really cool. If you're trying to get this girl, you probably shouldn't be doing that to her. So through the whole film, he doesn't believe her that this monster's real, and he just thinks she's kind of crazy, but he's into her, so he kind of puts up with it. But ultimately, she ends up exposing, obviously, that this monster is real, and he ends up destroying it with the little weird submarine thingy. The monster is not the cheesiest looking. Most of these sea monsters at this time looked ridiculous. They looked like styrofoam suits, something you'd see out of Power Rangers. But this one, by the end, you start to see it's not the greatest looking monster, but it's not the worst. And there is a scene when we first see it emerge at night in the distance coming through the fog where it's actually kind of effectively creepy for the time, honestly. The movie isn't really a movie that stands out too much, and it isn't a must-see, But again, it's all part of the Roger Corman legacy, and it's a good classic sea monster movie. I actually think it would be a really good double feature if you watched this with Attack of the Crab Monsters in whatever order. I think that would be an awesome, fun, like, cheesy sleepover double feature kind of thing to do. Now, there were countless other sea monster movies in the 50s and 60s, but I just want to touch upon some of the ones that stand out to me personally. But while these are all great and they're a fun watch and they're funny and how cheesy they can be, none of them are quite the best sea monster movie of all time quality. The sea monster craze kind of kicked down a little bit when the 70s came around. Jaws came out and took the world by storm, and every horror movie was just trying to rip off Jaws for a while. We got dumb crap like Orca and Piranha. Piranha could have been a cool concept because early in the movie you see this laboratory where they made all these weird piranha monster creatures. Like one's this awesome little stop motion man piranha thing walking around, and it looks so cool, but it never does anything in the movie. I thought we were going to get all these weird kind of variants of piranhas, like genetic mutations, like a giant one or a two-headed one or one that walks around with legs. But all you get in the movie is these regular piranha who move really fast, are really blurry, they're tiny, and they just kind of shake them in the camera and they make little noises. And that's supposed to be them ripping up the people, and the water just gets bloody around them. You never really see them interact with the people themselves that much. You see close-ups of the piranha, then you see close-ups of the people screaming, and just shot back and forth. And it's just not really a very interesting movie. I thought it was going to end with like a giant piranha. I remember when I first saw that movie, I was very disappointed. I'm like, they really thought this piece of crap was going to compete with Jaws? Are you serious? And it's not really even an ocean movie, so technically they're not sea monsters, but they end up getting to the sea at the end. Spoiler alert for a movie that came out back in 1978. So sea monster horror kind of took a back seat for a while. That is until 1989. I don't know what it was about 1989, but that was just the year for undersea sci-fi movies. We had Deep Star 6 and Leviathan. Leviathan it wants to be great. It really wants to be great. But there's just something about it that's just so uninteresting. When you watch the movie, there's absolutely no denying that it is a huge ripoff of the Alien franchise. The fact that the monster keeps changing what it looks like, and it gets into this facility in the middle of a place where no one can help you, and it kills everyone off one by one, and a woman ends up surviving and she has to defeat the alien at the end. Oh, I'm sorry. Sea monster at the end. It's the same movie. And when they introduce all the crew early on, the banter between them, it feels so much like Aliens. It's trying so hard to be like the Marines from that movie. It's just like stale rehashes of movies you've already seen, but done worse. It's not to say it's a bad movie. It's not bad. It's just unfortunately not doing anything new enough to have its own identity, which is kind of a bummer. There was also The Abyss that year, but I don't really think of The Abyss as a horror film, although it seems to be marketed as that sometimes. It's really like a deep sea, fantasy, sci-fi adventure movie that is kind of a drama. It's actually more of an emotional film. The special effects are outstanding. I mean, it's James Cameron, of course, but Abyss is a great movie, but yeah, we're talking sea monsters, and these aren't sea monsters. They're like friendly, weird butterfly, manta ray, mermaid, alien creatures. But there is a film that kind of fits into this genre of people in a facility or craft at the bottom of the ocean doing some sort of scientific mission or experiment, and strange phenomena start to occur that I love. But it came out about a decade later in 1998. I'm talking about none other than Michael Crichton's Sphere. It has an all-star cast with Sharon Stone, Dustin Hoffman, and Samuel L. Jackson, and it's arguably not a sea monster movie, but I think there's enough sea monster action in there to qualify it as a sea monster movie. Even though you don't see much of the monsters, the fear is more about the situation than it is what you see. The movie isn't really just a sea monster movie, though. It's more like an intellectual horror film, and I hate that terminology, just to be honest. Like, anytime someone says they like intellectual horror, it just makes them sound snobby. Slashers? Huh. I only like intellectual horror. Get off your high horse. Horror's fun. Everyone loves horror. I don't like it when people try to prove that they're better than other people or smarter than other people based on what media they like. Media's entertainment. It's for fun. We all love something intellectual, but it doesn't make you any better than the people who like stuff that's just stupid fun. It's all entertainment. Just enjoy it. But this is undoubtedly an intellectual horror film. There's a lot of mind-fucking going on in this movie. Like I said, it's more of a science fiction concept film than it is a monster movie, but you get jellyfish attacks, eel attacks, and even a giant squid attack, which is epic. So I think it qualifies, and those scenes are awesome, especially the giant squid scene. That is an amazing scene. I can't go too into it without spoiling much of the movie, so I'm going to say right here, spoilers from this point up until this point in the video. If you don't want to be spoiled on this movie, which I highly recommend if you haven't seen it, go watch it and then come back. If not, skip to that point, because I'm going to do some major spoilers here. So while they're doing an expedition under the sea, this team finds a sunken craft, and it's been abandoned for a long time. We don't know what it is. I don't know if it's alien or it's from another country. They find this giant, weird globe, well, sphere, in there that's almost looks like it's made out of liquid, almost looks like it's made out of soda or something. And no one knows what it is. They just know it's some sort of strange extraterrestrial object, potentially. And as the film goes on, strange things start to happen, like monster attacks and things. Just horrible things start to happen to the crew. And we start to learn that some of the crew, the three main characters, have gone into this sphere. You can walk into it and you sort of rotate around the inside of it. And doing so gives you the power to manifest your own thoughts and dreams. So all these things, like this Kraken attack and stuff, are all happening because of these characters thinking these horrible things happening, and then these horrible things happen. It is a genuinely chilling moment when Dustin Hoffman's character realizes that the entity they know as Jerry, who's been communicating with them telepathically through their computer, turns out to actually be Harry, Samuel L. Jackson's character, and that's why the only time they ever speak with this thing is when he's sleeping. The acting is top-notch. I feel like Samuel L. Jackson can go way over the top and go way too far sometimes, and just play that usual comically over-the-top character, but in here he's pretty good. He's pretty believable, and Sharon Stone and Dustin Hoffman are just amazing. That's not to say the rest of the cast isn't good also. I remember first discovering this movie by accidentally finding it on TV. And it must have been the summer of 2001. And I fell in love with this movie. I became obsessed with it. It was one of my favorite films for a couple years. I remember showing my friends it. I remember buying the VHS tape as soon as I saw it. Then a couple years later getting the DVD. It was one of those movies I had to own. I really loved this movie at that time. I was in like junior high, and this like blew my mind. High concept movies were like kind of new to me, so this really like was like a whoa moment when I saw this film. Weirdly enough, the first time I saw the movie on TV, it had a totally different ending than it had when I got it on VHS. I actually think the ending on VHS is better, where they just agree to forget the power and the sphere just leaves. But I do remember liking the original ending, but sadly, I actually don't even remember what it was. That was so long ago, and I've only seen the home video version of the movie since then that I actually don't remember what the original ending was. I do think it's very scary and sad and realistic, unfortunately, that the movie shows that if we were given some great power like that, the human race, most of them, would probably just use it to do terrible things. Whether they realize it or not, their subconscious would just make them do terrible things. A lot of us want to see bad things happen. We love a bad time. A lot of us are spiteful towards other people or envious towards other people, and our hateful thoughts on the world will just get the best of us. So I think it's not really like an upper, this movie. It's quite a downer. But I think this is the best sea monster movie ever, in my opinion. It's not what most people would think of when saying a sea monster movie, but it is definitely my favorite personally. This movie meant a lot to me when I first saw it, and I think it still holds up. It's an amazing film. Well, that does it. That's the end of my trilogy of oceanic horror films. I'll be back with the Search for the Spookiest soon with different themes. I'd like to get a lot of these done for Halloween season, but we'll see how that happens. Schedule's been pretty tight, so I haven't been able to do these videos as much. I really hope you enjoyed this. I don't know if this is really anything anyone cares about, just a guy sitting here dressed like an idiot talking about horror movies in a rushed, fast-paced style that doesn't offer as much content as a thorough review. But a lot of these movies, I feel like this works better because a thorough review would only be like a minute long for me. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I've helped you discover some awesome movies that maybe you never would even have known about or watched if not for watching these. So, well, at the end of the day, I just hope you had a great time watching this, and remember to stay spooky. Do all the liking and subscribing and the sharing and the bell stuff.